In the shadow of Moscow's impenetrable defenses, Soviet commanders scoffed at the mere suggestion that any American unmanned aerial vehicle could breach their sky. But then the rumor arrived, an unmanned craft soaring undetected, landing near the very heart of Soviet power. Was it Western propaganda, a KGB cover-up, or something far more embarrassing? The truth forced the world's most paranoid regime to question everything they believed about their own security. How did such an impossible event even become conceivable? In the late 1960s, American engineers pushed to the limits of unmanned flight with a series of machines that seemed straight out of science fiction. The Ryan Model 147, known as the Lightning Bug, first took to the skies over Vietnam, launched from modified C-130s, and recovered by helicopter after snapping photographs deep behind enemy lines. By the end of the Vietnam War, these drones had completed 3,500 sorties, gathering intelligence at altitudes that kept them out of reach of most anti-aircraft fire. But the real leap came with the Lockheed D-21. Sleek, jet-powered and built for speed, the D-21 was designed to cruise at over Mach 3, soaring above 90,000 feet. Its mission was to penetrate the most heavily defended airspace on Earth, snap high-resolution images, and escape before anyone could react. The D-21 carried no pilot, just a camera and a film canister ejected over the Pacific for mid-air retrieval. In theory, it could fly from the edge of Siberia to the heart of China and back without ever being seen. But the program was risky. 4 D-21s were lost over hostile territory, and after a crash in Siberia in 1969, the Soviets recovered the wreckage, fueling rumors and reverse engineering efforts. By 1971, the D-21 program was cancelled, its missions too dangerous and its secrets already slipping out. Yet for Soviet intelligence, these machines were proof that the Americans had crossed a line, sending unmanned eyes where pilots could not go, and raising the spectre of a future where the next intruder might not be so easily detected or so easily dismissed. After the U-2 incident in 1960, American intelligence planners faced a hard lesson. Every manned overflight risked not just a lost aircraft, but a captured pilot and global embarrassment. The answer for some at Langley and the Pentagon was to remove the pilot entirely. By the early 1970s, the CIA and the Air Force began testing a new approach: machines that could fly pre-programmed routes, snap their photos, and return without input from a ground crew. The Ryan Model 147 had already proven the concept in Southeast Asia, but the next generation aimed higher. Lockheed D-21, a jet-powered drone capable of Mach 3 speeds, was built to cross borders that no spy plane could risk. It was launched from the back of a modified SR-71 or B-52, then left to its own devices at altitudes above 90,000 feet. No radio chatter, no pilot to interrogate, just a camera, a flight computer, and a hope that the film capsule would make it home. The real driver was deniability. If a drone was shot down, Washington could claim ignorance or technical malfunction, sidestepping the diplomatic fallout that followed Gary Powers' capture. CIA records from the mid-1970s show a growing appetite for autonomy, with test flights at Groom Lake and Point Mugu focused on navigation and target accuracy. The logic was simple. In a world where a single incident could trigger a crisis, unmanned flight was a safer bet. This doctrine shift did not just change technology, it changed the very calculus of risk, making the idea of a machine slipping through the world's tightest air defenses seem not just possible, but inevitable. Soviet air defense planners in the 1980s trusted their perimeter. On paper, radar stations stretched from the Baltic to the Pacific with overlapping coverage and missile batteries ready to fire. But a closer look at the maps revealed two soft spots: the Arctic Gap and the Belarus sector. The Arctic approach, running along the 72nd parallel north, was a product of geography and physics. Radar outposts in Chukotka and Murmansk stood nearly 1,000 kilometers apart, separated by ice and empty tundra. At 90,000 feet, a jet-powered drone could cross this void in less than 20 minutes, flying above the horizon of most Soviet ground-based radars. Horizon math worked against the defenders. At that altitude, the radar line of sight stretched to about 450 kilometers, but the Earth's curve left whole regions blind. Even with the Deniable and P-14 Tall King arrays, the high-latitude ionosphere and sparse infrastructure meant detection was never guaranteed. The Belarus route was a different story, less about distance, more about terrain. Dense forests, low hills, and the marshes of Pripyat created natural radar shadows. Soviet PVO units ringed Minsk and Gomel, but between their coverage cones, dead zones formed, some as wide as 150 kilometers. At 90,000 feet, a target might appear briefly on a screen, then vanish as it crossed a radar shadow, especially if it hugged a corridor between overlapping sites. Western analysts calculated that a Mark III drone entering from the Polish border at 52.5 degrees north could reach the outskirts of Moscow in under half an hour, exploiting these windows. Soviet officers in classified briefings diagrammed these possibilities using grease pencils on acetate overlays, sketching arcs where the radar net thinned just enough for a fast, high-flying object to slip through. Each gap was a challenge: plug it with new radar, move a missile battery, or trust that the sky would hold. On the maps, the lines looked solid. In practice, the blind spots were real, and they haunted the men responsible for keeping Moscow safe. Late one summer in the 1980s, a rumor began to ripple through the outer districts of Moscow. A local worker said he'd seen something fall from the sky near the village of Khimki, just west of the city, close to a stretch of woodland and rail yards. The story spread quickly, picking up new details with each retelling: a strange metallic wreck, the smell of scorched fuel, a cordon of soldiers rushing to the scene before dawn. Some insisted it was a crashed weather balloon. Others whispered about an American drone, lost and broken, hauled away under canvas tarps before sunrise. Within hours, the tale reached the desks of the local KGB and GRU detachments. At first, officers dismissed the chatter as Western disinformation, another NATO ghost planted to rattle nerves. After all, the official maps showed nothing could reach this deep into Soviet airspace without tripping a dozen alarms. The radar consoles along the Belarus sector had reported nothing unusual. The Arctic screens, notorious for their gaps, were quiet, yet the story would not die. A civilian technician, called in to inspect a damaged power line, described a scorched patch of earth and twisted metal fragments. He was questioned, then quietly told to forget what he'd seen. Behind closed doors, a GRU radar officer reviewed the logs from that night. The data was incomplete. A high-altitude track, visible for less than a minute, had blinked in and out just west of Minsk, too fast, too faint to classify. The officer scribbled a note in the margin: possible blind sector exploitation, recommend perimeter audit. It was a rare admission that the system might have failed. Officially, the incident never happened. The fragments vanished into a locked evidence room, and the logs were filed away. But the rumor persisted, feeding a quiet anxiety among those who understood just how thin the shield could be when the right path was chosen. In the months that followed, some began searching for answers in the archives, hoping to find proof, or at least a paper trail, that could explain how a foreign machine might have slipped through the cracks. A single document, stamped with the seal of the KGB 8th Chief Directorate, sits on a faded folder in the archives. The paper is thin, the ink beginning to bleed at the edges. The classification block is still clear. It reads, Top Secret. The date is August 2nd, 1992. This is not a public file. It surfaced only after the collapse, when a handful of internal memoranda were quietly released to Russian researchers combing through the remnants of the old security apparatus. On the third page, a phrase stands out in the clipped language of Soviet bureaucracy. It reads, "Foreign object retrieved in the area of Red Square, transferred to the Central Scientific Research Institute for examination." The memo is suggestive and the line is specific, but the provenance of the note remains obscure. There are no attached photographs, no chain of custody forms, just a list of signatures, most of them illegible, and a routing slip that traces a path from the Moscow military district headquarters to a technical division in the Ministry of Defense. The reference number, 81247, matches no known incident in the official logs. The document's release was never announced in the press. Instead, it appeared in a footnote in a 1995 monograph on Soviet air defense failures, cited as source withheld by request. A former KGB archives specialist, now an independent historian, recalls the day he first handled the file. He describes the paper as brittle, the folder misfiled among routine incident reports from the late 1980s. The language, he says, is deliberate, neither confirming nor denying the nature of the object, only that it was not of domestic origin and required technical analysis. The document's margins are filled with rubber-stamped dates from August through November, each marking a new set of hands. No one annotated the outcome. For years, the memo has been a magnet for speculation. Some claim it refers to a downed weather balloon, others to a piece of Western technology lost during a diplomatic visit. But the phrase "retrieved in the area of Red Square" continues to draw attention. In the absence of photographs or a public statement, the memo stands as a fragment, suggestive but incomplete. The uncertainty is not just in what the document says, but in what it omits. In the world of Cold War secrets, sometimes the most telling evidence is what remains unsaid. A grainy video, widely circulated in the early 2000s, claims to show a military convoy moving through the streets near the Kremlin on a summer night in the 1980s. The footage, said to be shot by a bystander with a handheld camera, has drawn forensic scrutiny from analysts on both sides of the Atlantic. The original digital file contains no EXYF metadata, no time, date, or device information. Every copy available online is a compressed derivative, with heavy codec artifacts and no traceable chain of custody. Frame-by-frame analysis detects analog film grain and color profiles consistent with Soviet-era 8mm stock, but the audio track is inconsistent, with abrupt cuts and background noise overlays that suggest later editing. One analyst points out that the shadows cast by the vehicles do not align with known streetlight positions in Red Square during the 1980s, while another notes that the convoy's lead truck bears markings introduced only after 1991. Attempts to geolocate the scene using architectural details reveal a partial match to a side street near the State Historical Museum, but key landmarks are either obscured or missing, raising the possibility of composite imagery. A close inspection of the uniforms shows standard Soviet army dress, but the insignia are blurred beyond recognition, likely a result of digital resampling rather than deliberate masking. The probability score for authenticity remains sharply divided. Some experts assign less than 20% chance that the footage is genuine, citing the lack of provenance, the absence of original negatives, and clear signs of post-production tampering. Others argue that while the clip cannot be verified, the technical anomalies could be explained by multiple generations of analog copying and hurried digitization in the 1990s. No physical artifact, no canister, no original tape has ever surfaced for independent testing. In the end, the convoy footage stands as a digital phantom, suggestive but unproven, its status unresolved. For Soviet officials in the era, the very existence of such a rumor, amplified by blurry images and whispered speculation, was enough to trigger policy reviews and internal audits, regardless of what the film actually showed. Within days of the first rumors, the Soviet Ministry of Defense issued a formal directive, a comprehensive audit of the entire air defense network surrounding Moscow. The order, dated September 12, 1987, arrived on the desks of district commanders and radar station chiefs in thick sealed envelopes. Every unit, from the outermost radar pickets along the Arctic approaches to the missile batteries ringing the capital, was instructed to submit status reports and readiness logs within 72 hours. The language left little room for interpretation. Inspect, verify, and report any anomalies, no matter how minor. Teams from the 8th Chief Directorate began unannounced visits to radar sites and command bunkers, armed with checklists and authority to question local officers. Maintenance logs were scrutinized for skipped calibrations. Communications records were reviewed for unexplained outages. At several stations, technicians were ordered to rerun simulated intercepts using archived radar tracks from the night of the alleged breach. Any unexplained data gaps, even a single missing blip, triggered follow-up interviews and, in some cases, temporary suspensions. The audit extended beyond hardware. Personnel files were quietly reviewed for signs of negligence or divided loyalty. In a few cases, officers found themselves reassigned or placed on indefinite leave while investigators pored over their actions during the window in question. The pressure was unmistakable. No one wanted to be the next scapegoat. By the end of the month, the first summary reports landed on the desk of the Deputy Minister of Defense. The findings were classified above top secret, sealed with a red wax stamp, and routed to a select committee charged with recommending upgrades. For the men and women who manned the screens and missile consoles, the message was clear. The era of routine was over. Every gap, every unexplained flicker now carried the weight of suspicion. The first wave of audit reports landed with a single demand: reinforce the shield, close every gap, and do it fast. By October 1987, the Soviet Ministry of Defense authorized an emergency allocation of 300 million rubles for new radar installations across the western and northern sectors. Procurement lists expanded overnight, adding dozens of P-18 and P-19 radars for low-altitude coverage, upgraded Deniable UHF arrays for high-altitude sweeps, and a network of passive detection sites designed to pick up even the faintest electronic signatures. In the Arctic, teams broke ground on 6 new outposts along the 72nd parallel, each equipped with hardened shelters and satellite uplinks to Central Command. Over Belarus, planners mapped out a dense lattice of overlapping radar cones, filling dead zones with mobile units and deploying experimental optical sensors to catch targets that slipped past conventional screens. The new protocol manuals ran hundreds of pages. Operators drilled on jamming-resistant communication, rapid cross-sector handoffs, and fallback procedures for radar outages. The first passive sensor arrays, quiet, unblinking, immune to electronic deception, were slated for live trials by spring 1988. Budget lines for these upgrades appeared in classified annexes, their numbers rising each quarter as the urgency filtered down from the Politburo. By the end of the year, the perimeter around Moscow bristled with new hardware, and the zone of uncertainty that once haunted the command map began to shrink. For the officers charged with defending the capital, the message was unmistakable. The era of assumed security was over. Every sector, every frequency, every horizon now carried the weight of a direct order. Never let the next intruder slip through unseen. In an era where fact and fiction blur at the speed of rumor, the real vulnerability is not in radar gaps. It is in the stories nations tell and believe. Today, drone incursions and digital disinformation test defenses in new ways. When legends become strategy, vigilance demands more than hardware. Some breaches begin not in the sky, but in the imagination. What lines are we crossing now? Share your thoughts below.